Well, hello everyone, LNS 25, and hopefully some guests are popping in as we gather for what would have been, I guess, the sixth in our series of sixth or seventh in our public lecture series, but is turning out to be our second public lecture via Zoom, organized around our course, Public Art and Belonging, LNS 25. I don't know, for people who are just joining us for the first time, my name is Lee Rayford. I'm an associate professor of African American Studies. I was about to say here at UC Berkeley, but I should say at UC Berkeley, but here would be, I'm an associate professor of my bedroom here in Berkeley. And I co-teach this course with Lauren Croix, who is associate professor of history of art and also faculty director of the Hearst Museum of Anthropology. So this course, Public Art and Belonging, first I should say we always started our lectures when we gathered in the Osher Theater at BAM-PFA at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. We began with a land recognition, and recognition that the BAM-PFA and UC Berkeley campus, that our meetings took place on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone, the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. And we recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. We acknowledge and pay respect to Ohlone ancestors, peoples today, and the Ohlone future to come. And I also would urge people, wherever you may be sheltering in place, to take a moment to figure out, to learn who were the original peoples and their legacy in the space where you are. And that has always been important for us for this lecture series in the course, which explores relationships between art, belonging, race, place, history, memory, and the imagining of just futures. And I think we, like all of us, we kind of had a moment or an ongoing moment, we're in the moment, right? Where we paused and, as we scattered and said, okay, well, what are we supposed to do in this class that's really about kind of occupying public space, about sharing it, about remaking it, about being in the world together. And that, felt a little bit uncertain and unsure for us. But I think over the last few weeks of sheltering in place, a few things have become clear to us. First is that human beings make art. That's what we do. And the necessity of art, especially in difficult times, art only becomes more important. And art has also in this moment, we're finding ways of constituting new publics, new notions of belonging, new ways of being together and expressing ourselves. And so for Lauren and I, it became also important to continue the conversation in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to think about how we can still, what this conversation means and what art actually will mean for us in this imagining of what's to come next once we all leave our homes. So that said, we're really glad that Ronni Favors is joining us from the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre. On Tuesday, we'll be joined by artist Sadie Barnett and San Francisco experimental space programmer Dina Beard. That next Thursday, we'll be joined by Cafe Ohlone co-founders Vincent Medina and Louis Trevino. The following Thursday, August, boy, what month is it? Hello, April. it's only April. Argus Canupa Hanska Luger in collaboration with the Arts Research Center. We just also want to thank all the people who have helped bring us together, who have provided financial, logistical, and emotional support. So the course is, of course, part of the series Thinking Through Art Plus Design at Berkeley, supported by the Office of Art Plus Design. It's a campus initiative under the steady and visionary leadership of Professor Shannon Jackson, that connects and fortifies creative life of departments, schools, centers, museums, and student clubs throughout the Berkeley campus. And we are also grateful to BAM PFA as well. So all of the sort of expenses for the course are made possible by A+D and by generous philanthropic donations, which we are going to continue, I think will become only more important moving forward. But today we are joined by Ronni Favors, who is the rehearsal director of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre. Ronni Favors is originally from Iowa City. For those of you who kind of joined us before we got started, normally these are the conversations that would happen kind of in hushed tones in the front row of the theater as you all are sort of finding seats. But you heard that Ronni is originally from Iowa City, Iowa, though her mother is a 30-year resident of East Bay. Ronni studied at the National Music Camp in Interlochen, Michigan, and with the camp scholarship, she continued her training at the Ailey School as a fellowship student. Ms. Favors was a member of Ailey II, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre, and the Lar Lubovitch Dance Company, and a recipient of the Min on Art Award. Ms. Favors was the ballet instructor at the 1989 inaugural session of AileyCamp in Kansas City and served as artistic director of the camp. And I feel personally, we were also just saying, my son attended AileyCamp at UC Berkeley a number of years ago. He's 17 now. He attended the camp when he was 11, and it was just a really profound experience for all of us. And so I'm hoping we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Ms. Favors is the founding director of Children's Aid AileyCamp in New York and provided guidance in the national implementation of the AileyCamp program. In 1997, Ms. Favors was named Assistant Rehearsal Director of Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre and was its rehearsal director from 1999 to 2010. She worked with local dance students who performed in Alvin Ailey's Memoria in Johannesburg, South Africa, as well as in Seattle, Copenhagen, Los Angeles, Chicago, Kansas City, and New York. Most recently, she set Alvin Ailey's Night Creature on 2 Dance and Oregon Ballet Theatre. And then she rejoined the company as rehearsal director in 2019. And that was what was going to bring her originally to Berkeley for the annual run at Zellerbach Playhouse, which is sort of one of the key sort of pillars of the Zellerbach season at the main theater in Berkeley. But we're really glad that Ronni can still join us from her home office. Thank you. Where are you sheltering in place?
I'm in Brooklyn right now, the place to be, sheltering in place.
Well, we're glad that you are joining us safe and well.
Thank you.
From Brooklyn. So I want to start with the first question that we have asked every one of our guests up to this point. And I think this question continues to have relevance and is an invitation to kind of think broadly. But how do you define public art, and why does it matter now?
I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I still haven't come up with an answer that I'm happy with. But I think in terms of our work, and our history, that we've really learned that public art for us doesn't exist just on the stage or in the theater, but that it's, we've always had a very robust program of doing a lot of outreach in many different areas, whether it's doing master classes, in the cities where we're performing, or we have a partnership with the New York City public school system where teaching artists will come and teach classes for, a semester in elementary schools. We have a great curriculum initiative called Revelations Interdisciplinary Approach, which combines the choreography of Revelations with teaching social studies and English language skills, and doing that in several cities across the country. We really like to bring the mountain to Mohammed. We've also, I think one of the most profound experiences I had in terms of this public art, or broadening our reach, as it will, was when I was a member of Ailey II, and I was a young dancer, and we were contracted to perform in the local prisons throughout the state of New York. And so here we're going into, maximum security prisons, and day after day after day for 2 weeks, just performing, just dancing, doing Revelations, doing other repertory in our that we had. And for me, that was really eye-opening experience in terms of what art can do, what dance can do. I mean, I'd had kind of an intellectual understanding that, you can change people's lives, or you can really affect people, and, but it was really a theoretical idea for me until I had the experience of going into these prisons and really putting myself in their shoes, wondering, what is it like? How many outside groups come in here every year? How many times do these people get to interact with someone that's not an inmate or a guard or, a loved one, to be able to have some kind of shared experience, and then for it to be in an artistic one. So that really led me to want to experience that in many other ways. And that's really where, I'm going off on a sidetrack already, but that's where AileyCamp became so important to me, to be able to have an arena where we can use dance as a vehicle, that it's not, the performance is not the pinnacle of the experience, but rather the coming together, the gathering of people to share an experience that will enable each person involved to be able to tap into their voice, to discover something new about him or herself. And Ailey has always kind of been on the forefront of finding new and different ways to be able to, as Mr. Ailey said, and he always said, like, dance came from the people and should always be delivered back to the people. So this has been our mandate for 62 years, is to try to discover and imagine as many ways as possible to deliver dance back to the people. And Mr. Ailey wanted to make sure that the arts weren't the province of the elite, but that art is a natural outgrowth of the human experience. And so our company's mission is to celebrate, specifically the African American cultural experience and the modern dance tradition, but to really, make it about people. And so I think, whether it's, in the United States or, wherever we are in the world, finding as many ways to interact with people, to create dance experiences. You mentioned the work, Mr. Ailey's Memoria, that I had the privilege to engage and set for student dancers. And that piece was choreographed in 1979 as an elegy to a dear friend of his, Joyce Trissler, who was a member of the Lester Horton Dance Company when Mr. Ailey was just starting out in his own dance career. They all moved to New York. She had her company. She also choreographed things for the Ailey Company, set some of her works on the Ailey Company, but died at a young age. And we were on touring in Europe at the time, so Alvin wasn't able to attend her funeral, but wanted to do something to commemorate her life, her spirit, and the tremendous contributions that she had made to the dance community, and particularly the Ailey dance community, as a teacher in the school and a mentor to many dance students, including myself. So he choreographed this piece called Memoria, which celebrated her life. And it was the first time that all the elements of the Ailey umbrella were on stage together. So the first company, Ailey II, and students from the school, selected students from the school, were all performing together, choreographed specifically for this piece. And this piece actually, aside from Revelations, is the only piece that has been performed continually every season since 1979 when it was first premiered. So as the years went on, many other cities wanted to be able to have this Memoria experience. So what we started doing is I would go out a week or two ahead of the company, hold auditions for local dance students, advanced dance students, and bring a group of heretofore strangers together to be able to create this work and then perform on stage with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre. And so it was really amazing, especially in Johannesburg. We were there twice. The company was there in 1996 and then 1997 and 98. And I was able to go and set Memoria on in Johannesburg in 1998. And everything was still fresh and new, with the apartheid movement having been just abolished. And really my mission was to bring all these disparate dance backgrounds into one room. The kids that had only studied West African, the kids that had only studied some type of modern, the kids that had only studied ballet, and to bring everybody in the room, just mess with their heads a bit, and create this dance. And again, it was another opportunity to create this, what I like to think of that as public art, bringing people into the theater that wouldn't normally come. And what it did was, so all these communities that these kids represented were coming to the theater to see their neighbors, their children, performing on stage, and people that generally probably would not have come to a concert dance performance had it not been, that we created these on-ramps for them to be able to see someone that they knew, that they could recognize on stage, and then within the performance itself to be able to recognize themselves through the work that was presented on stage. That's always been, I think, the thing that's most attractive about the Ailey companies. No matter where we go in the world, people are able to see themselves, to imagine themselves through what they see on stage.
And that has been, I think, in my understanding of the origins of the company and Mr. Ailey's sort of grounding ideas, right, in part was to build together or put together a repertoire and a company that draws on so many different kinds of dance, so many different kinds of bodies, still rooted in African American and African diasporic culture, but that is expansive enough, right, to create a new understanding of, what bodies can do and what communities can be like. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen the choreography or the company as well produce different notions of belonging as well.
Well, I think initially, especially back in the late 50s, when Alvin was creating the company and coming up with ideas for how he wanted to celebrate, how he wanted to, create a place for Black dancers. I always look at Alvin as kind of as a problem solver or contributor, because there was a big problem at the time for Black dancers that wanted to perform concert work, that there just wasn't the space for them. There were many, many very talented dancers, very many talented choreographers, but the notion of what Black bodies could do or what Black subject matter could be was very, very limited, whether it's either to be explored as kind of like an exotic presentation, some kind of indigenous dance, or native culture, or some kind of primitive culture, kind of
some drums involved.
Yeah, some drums and definitely bare torsos and a feather or two if you can manage it. And at the same time, this whole idea that a generation of Black dancers were trying to confront, which was that as human beings, we can do ballet, we can do modern, we can do many different styles. And so I think what was so revolutionary and audacious about Alvin was the idea that he's just going to take the space, without apology, but to really to confront all of these preconceived ideas about what Black bodies could do by taking the space and utilizing dancers that had strong technical backgrounds in ballet or different styles of Martha Graham technique, Lester Horton technique, Doris Humphrey technique. And so combining this with the subject matter, his early subject matter of exploring his blood memories of growing up in rural Texas in the Depression years, and the intense privation and the intense struggle and lack of safety, and all of those conditions that we know from our past, to bring those to the stage, but to celebrate the journey that these people undertook and came through victoriously. And this combination of kind of like, vernacular subject matter with high technical proficiency in performing it was really kind of unheard of. Usually you'd either do, like ballet, or you would do some kind of,
like Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, like some kind of, like we, I don't want to say this in a kind of a pejorative way, but, like with, what's the word I want? See, this is why I'm losing my vocabulary, but this is what gets me into the stores early in the morning for the senior citizen shopping hour. So I have to be very happy about that. But, the anthropological type of dance. So, we're kind of limited in those kind of areas where you could either like, just look at it from this is what, our ancestors did, but there wasn't really the place for Black dancers, especially modern dancers, to be able to perform on the concert stage. There's room on Broadway, there were room, minstrel shows, like all of the, highly presentational performance styles. But in terms of concert dance, there weren't that many opportunities. And so this is what he wanted to address with his company. There was also at the YMCA, where the company's first performance was held in 1958, was known as a place where this was one place in New York where many Black it's okay, we're good. Could have an opportunity to perform, but they would have these one-night seasons, so all these amazing works of art were being created and then just lost. And so he created his company. He wanted the company to perform this dual function, to celebrate the African-American cultural experience as well as being a repository for modern dance works, so that there could be a place where the modern dance equivalent of Swan Lake could be performed, maintained, preserved, the modern dance equivalent of, you name it, would have a home and could be preserved as any other great work of art could be.
And I'm curious how, in your time as with Ailey, how your technique or your understanding of dance has changed. I mean, you talked a little bit about first teaching dance in prisons and how that transformed your idea of what dance could do in a community.
We performed, we didn't teach.
You performed, okay. But if you could say a little bit about what, how coming to Ailey maybe transformed your own practice, your own approach to dance, and like your training initially was in ballet and modern, or
mostly ballet. I was bound and determined to be a ballet dancer. partly because, when I first started studying as a child, we had, a children's dance program at the University of Iowa, and we had modern dance and we had ballet. And the modern dance we were taught at the time was, the imagine you're a flower blooming in the sun. And, there was just I didn't find that intellectually compelling at all. What I loved about ballet was just the intellectual and physical challenge of, the specificity of it all, and being able to, or the demands on, being a specific place at a specific time in a specific way. And that was really exciting to me. And it really struck a chord with me. So I really wasn't interested in modern dance at all. And I also, when I would go to see it, when my mother would drag me off to see, these dance companies, I guess my needs as a person weren't being answered by what I saw on stage. And it was all very abstract. And again, this was the early, mid to early 60s and then late 60s, 70s. So that's where, the dance world was at the time, a little bit more abstract, a little bit more, and not very representational. I didn't ever feel emotionally engaged with what I saw on stage. And then my mother dragged me to see Alvin Ailey. And I saw Revelations, and I also saw Donald McHale's Rainbow Around My Shoulder. Mm-hmm. And that totally changed my worldview about dance, about myself, about where I could fit into the dance world, about myself as a Black dancer, and where there would be a place, that I found that there would be a place for me because, very real concern we had, and we're still struggling with this now in the ballet world, is mm-hmm. where are there places for Black dancers? And seeing the Ailey Company and finding a place where I would be able to utilize all of my skills, as well as have my emotional needs met as an audience member and as a performer, was really just transformational. And as soon as I saw Revelations, I took my pointe shoes and dropped them on the floor and said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be involved in.
I love in the video that just has gone up recently of Hope Boykin doing a Revelations inspired rehearsal. The kind of that wedding of both of the technical aspects, but also as storytelling, right? And as a kind of narrative structure. So, right, we always, the kind of, we're in a deep plie, reaching to the ground, but we're also, right, sort of meant to be approaching the water, and we have, there's a kind of tentativeness. And so, and I think there's this kind of the power in, like you said, the kind of both the intellectual and the technical and the representational and spiritual that gets sort of just gathered up in the dance. And so maybe you could, I'm wondering, Lauren, maybe we could just take a look at some of the images, and Ronni, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your favorite dances are in the repertoire, and why. And I'm thinking.
Well, first of all,
besides, yes.
Well, here's Revelations, Alvin Ailey's masterpiece, and I'm not a parent, but if I was a parent and I had multiple children, I would never tell you who my favorite child was. So I feel the same way about the repertory, except for Revelations, which of course is everyone's favorite. But aside from that, I love them all for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And even with Revelations, I think what is so brilliant about it is that there are so many ways that you can approach it in terms of your understanding of it. I was not raised in the church, and so, but I still had an amazingly profound experience with Revelations. I could recognize people from my past or my mother's past, but I could also feel the emotional struggle of, being denied something just by being Black in America, at that time. And, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. So I had, I have my own experiences of that I can relate to, using this music, using this imagery, but that still speak to me without having had a specific experience in a church setting or in a Christian religious setting. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is also what is so brilliant about Revelations, is that we do perform it all over the world, and the reaction to it is really the same all over the world, no matter what people's backgrounds are from. And I had a really interesting experience in Germany a few years ago, where I was asked to teach a workshop to some, elementary, middle school kids about I've been buked, and using that as a way for them to experience this piece. And I was really struggling with, how to explain, to 8 and 9-year-olds, in a nutshell, the African-American experience in the United States, and how can I create some place for them to relate to it, in their own lives. And just these universal ideas of being oppressed, or, not even ideas, experiences of being oppressed, of being denied agency, of being othered, of being, of wanting desperately to get out of your situation, whatever it is, and can't. Just so trying to, universalize these themes, not make it so specific to the African American experience, so that these kids could understand it, but educating them about where Alvin's images, his blood memories, came from. Mm-hmm. The idea of being, like this, the opening stance where people are. Can I show you a little bit?
Yes.
I'm just going to stand up myself.
Yes.
Let's see if I can do this here, if you can still see me. Mm-hmm. But this idea of, standing with tension, like you're being pulled into the ground, and yet trying to, escape your surroundings, try to escape your situation, while not being able to move. The dancers don't really move their feet in the very beginning part, but we're reaching, we're trying to escape our boundaries, we're trying to find some way out of this confinement, this imprisonment. And we can experience this in any way. We can be environmentally imprisoned like we are now. We can be emotionally imprisoned. We can do that to ourselves. We can have it imposed on us, with all these things. So anyway, I taught these kids the movement, and also having to have it translated, so the interpreters trying to explain to them. And you could see that they weren't quite really getting it. Okay, but we'll try. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until the music came on. I had them begin, and then the music came on, and the opening chords of I've Been Buked, and you could just see mm-hmm. that they understood, that they were, and they were reaching, and they were denied, and they were trying a different way, and they were, mm-hmm. and so it was really amazing to me to have this experience that just again shows the universality of what art can do in order to, in terms of bringing people together. Just the genius of Alvin's choreography to take these themes and to put them into very simple movements that kind of start out, like if you go through the arc of Revelations, it start out more abstract and then get more literal, mm-hmm. As the dance progresses, so that it invites the audience in, so from the very beginning, we can just kind of experience it as a design, as a quiet moment to, just kind of like mm-hmm. let the audience sneak in, and then we have another experience, we have another experience, we have another experience, so that by the end of the piece, everyone has gone through this transcendent journey.
And then we point, right?
And we rock in my soul.
So we rock, right. I mean, I think that is, you know, there is something, right, so profound in those gestures, and that is also so endemic to, at least for me, the experience of Black life, that is that the kind of the rising and falling, the boundness, and also and the flight, are inseparable, right? And that just encapsulates that kind of what that experience sort of feels like, looks like, sounds like, and exactly that kind of, all throughout Revelations, there is this, right, the constant, the sort of rising and the falling and the reaching down, and I can't remember the, you know, we're you know, the dancers can't get up off the ground, right? And it's constantly, it is, you know, I can see how you would teach Revelations alongside Souls of Black Folk, for example. And I think that's, but so, and I think, I guess what I want to say is that I've been, this moment of being confined or sheltered in place has, I think, at least offered me a sense of, gotten me to think very differently about what movement is and can be, and also to kind of, to feel, I've actually danced probably more in the last couple weeks in the privacy of my own home, right, where no one can see me, than I have, you know, that I have in years, right? And so I was wondering if you could say a little bit, how Ailey, how the dance, how the theater is kind of changing, or has been responding to COVID-19, because I think I've also been really impressed with the way Ailey has, where there's a presence, and it feels so, the company feels so vital right now to me.
Yeah, you know, you just never know how you're going to respond until you're tested, you know, in an extreme situation. And for me, it's been really so just moving to see how the dancers have taken the mantle of what it means to be, you know, part of the Ailey company, to be an Ailey dancer. You know, we talk about it all the time, you know, as I mentioned at the, you know, in my earlier words, that Alvin said that dance came from the people and should always be delivered back to the people. And, you know, we talk a lot about being the Ailey family and the privilege of performing this work that, you know, is so profound and is, you know, doesn't shy away from reality, but is always optimistic, you know, so it invites people in. And, but to watch how they have responded to this situation has been just so moving, you know, because they've never met, there's nobody in the company that's met Alvin. You know, nobody in the company was alive when he was alive. I mean, many of the people weren't even alive when he was alive, let alone having, you know, met him or worked with him, or, you know, so all of what's gone on for the past, you know, 30 years since Alvin died has been through the, you know, tireless efforts of people like Sylvia Waters, the director of Ailey II for many years, of course, Judith Jamison, you know, our second artistic director, and Mr. Ailey's, you know, artistic muse, Masazumi Chaya, who just retired this year, and who spent 47 years at Alvin's side, the many Sarita Allen, Elizabeth Rojas, like all these dancers, Tony Pierce, like people have just been, you know, in the Ailey orbit that have felt so profoundly their responsibility to keep this this Ailey legacy alive. But we don't really know what that means. We just talk about it a lot, but then to see it coalesce in such a way, you know, I don't know if we could show this video of the dancers. So it's called Alone Together, The Show Must Go On. And they created this about a week. So the dancers were in Iowa City, and had just traveled from Iowa City to Dallas on March 13th, and got to March 12th, got off the planes, got to the hotel, and about an hour after checking in, we're told that's it. The tour is off. You know, Dallas is canceled, LA is canceled. We're not sure about these other cities, but it's time to come back to New York. And then, you know, the domino effect started, and we all had to shelter in place. And so just left with nothing. One of the dancers, Miranda Quinn, who's actually one of our newest dancers, just joined this past summer, came up with this idea about Alone Together. And I'll just say no more. This is the beginning of Revelations, performed by members of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theatre. And dogs.
Lauren, unmute yourself, maybe, because we can't hear the.
Can you hear it now?
No, we can't.
Oh, I gotta make sure this.
Thanks. How about now? Sorry, my son is just rubbing there.
Yay. Here we go. Thank you. So that kind of says it all to me. I mean, just the this idea of being alone together, still finding ways to share our art, and it's especially challenging for dance. I think it's, you know, you can't get much more analog than dance. Mm-hmm. You have to be in a room together. We have, you know, normally you have to touch each other. If we're a performing entity, you have to be in a theater together. You have to have witnesses. So we're going on this experience together. But the dancers have really come up with other ways. So, you know, besides this Revelations tape video, ooh, I just dated myself. Once again, get me to the store early. Anyway, but there are a couple of other pieces in the repertory that are now on the Ailey Dancers Instagram page. Couple of pieces from our current artistic director, Robert Battle. Ella, done some music of Ella Fitzgerald, and then Takademi. And then there's something else that they just put up there. I can't remember right now. As you said, you know, in your opening words, I think we're all kind of grappling with now, what does this mean, and how do we continue to create and produce art? Oh, the other piece is Lazarus. That's right, that's choreographed by Ronni Harris. So I think this is going to be a conversation. Obviously, this is just the very, very, very beginning of this conversation, and searching for solutions, especially in our particular art form, which requires that you eventually get together with people, you know, in order to either create the work or perform the work or, you know, experience it or rehearse it. So it'll be interesting. You know, we don't know when we're going to be able to start up again. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, with our art form, we'll probably be one of the last ones, because you need to be, you know, we can't social distance and dance, and you can't social distance and, you know, perform unless we have like half empty houses and everybody sits 6 feet away from each other. So we're trying to come up with, various ideas. We just opened our Ailey All Access channel, which can be reached through alvinailey.org, where right now you can watch Revelations, and we'll be putting up different works from our repertory, in the coming weeks and months, so that we can still create some kind of a dialogue with our audiences, and our audiences can still enjoy these amazing dancers that we have. And based on what they've done so far, I really feel confident that, with so many creative minds coming together, that we'll find a way, to expand on how we think of the creative process, how we think of the performance process.
Mm-hmm. And you've also opened up, or you will be making Ailey classes.
Yeah, all of that's on the Access channel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can take an Ailey class. The dancers have their own Ailey. They have their own channel where we've been doing some gyrokinesis classes for them, and different kind of ways to keep them engaged in their bodies, because again, you can only do so much in your living room or bedroom or wherever it is. Another important ingredient of dance is space.
Right.
And so, the ability to be able to, use space as part of the art form is important.
Mm-hmm. I have also been impressed as well, the question of alone together, and how sharing a choreography is actually something that feels very antithetical to a kind of American mindset, right? That everyone sort of walks their own way and does their own thing, and don't tell me that I can't do something, right? But also this powerful lesson of having a shared choreography that brings us together as part of that connects us to something larger than ourselves. And so before we open it up to questions, I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts about what kind of knowledge or lessons for living might be found in movement and dance.
Well, first of all, movement is so necessary for life. This is how we first find out life exists, right? Is you have a fluttering, you see an ultrasound and there's a little flutter, and we know that there's a life. And so life doesn't really exist without movement. And I think especially in this time where we can feel confined, we are confined, it's important to, and some of these phrases have been just so overused that I hesitate, but to find yourself within your body. But it's really important to be in touch with your body. And, talking about your son's experience at AileyCamp, I think this was one of the, great things that, again, that I learned from watching these young people go through this experience, where for those who don't know anything about AileyCamp, it's a 6-week program for middle school kids from mostly underserved communities. But they get to take dance classes taught by teaching artists and learning Ailey repertory. And it's not necessarily to train them to be professional dancers, but to train them in basic life skills through the language of dance, because dance embodies many of the life skills we need. You have to be disciplined, you have to be motivated, you have to learn to work in groups, you have to learn to delay your gratification. There, all these different life lessons.
I made my son come back because we're talking about AileyCamp. I know. This is my son, Maceo.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
This
Good,
is
how are
Miss
you?
Favors.
Nice to meet
Who was in the rehearsal, and also our whole class. But we were talking, Miss Favors was just talking about the importance of AileyCamp, and I think what was really great watching you was just that you had a sense of your belonging in the world and your belonging in community, but also about belonging in your own body. And that was, I think, was so powerful to watch, especially for middle school kids. Did you say anything about AileyCamp?
I just very much enjoyed my time in it. I got to meet Mama Washington during at my time with AileyCamp, which then she was my high school dance teacher, and I very
Yes.
a lot of my like happiness in high school to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Please say hi to her for me.
If I get to see if I get to see her.
Yeah, somewhere, somehow, right? I'll say it myself. But the idea, I think it's so true, is about learning to be in your body. Thank you. And that's what, you know, just whether it's dance training or anything, you know, but I think there's value in choreography, so to speak, or being instructed to utilize your body in a specific way, a specific time, because it gives you experiences you wouldn't normally give yourself if you're always accustomed to moving through the world in a particular way. And having some direction and instruction from the outside challenges us to think about ourselves in a different way. Think about how I move. How do I hold myself? Where is my weight? Am I rooted? Am I off the ground? Am I, you know, am I up out of myself, or how do I get back in myself? And so, you know, of course, I'm going to recommend the Ailey classes, but I think it's important, you know, for all of us, especially in this time, to remember that our bodies aren't just shells, you know, that we don't just live in our brains, we live in our bodies, and our bodies need to be expressed as well. Our physical being has to be expressed and stretched and actualized and experienced, so that we can really have that, you know, mind-body connect that we talk about. But it's a real thing. And especially now when it's so easy to feel, you know, all the things that we kind of based our lives on so far, right? I work here, I know these people, I do these things, you know, and we're not able to experience our lives in the way that we're accustomed to. So now is a time that's a great opportunity, actually, to be able to investigate your life in another way, you know, in a very physical way. It doesn't have to be, you know, really strenuous. It can be as simple as, you know, circling your wrists, or rolling your head, or rolling your shoulders, or shrugging them up and down. What's the difference?
Yeah.
You know, just having those experiences, moving your rib cage from side to side. You don't even have to get out of a chair. You can stretch your legs in front of you and flex and point your feet. But to be able to kind of get back to who, you know, who we elementally are, which are, you know, moving, a bunch of cells moving. So in order to really express our lives, you know, we have to express movement in one way or another.
Thank you so much. Well, we're going to open it up to questions now. What we people can do is they can use the little hand raise function, or if you feel more comfortable, you can type it in the chat function. And then we can figure out, this is the part where I get a little frantic because I'm not sure how to make this work. But while we're waiting for people to ask questions, and also, so if you for our students in LNS 25, you can just retype the question that you posted in B courses into the chat or what have you. But while we're waiting on that, I'm also going to show my, this is like,
oh, you have the Barbie
today. If
Yay.
you can see it, it's backwards, but this is, it's still boxed, but our Revelations Judith Jamison doll. And
yes.
it's just like, so it actually is up amongst our art. Is one of the sort of most beautiful renderings, to kind of be able to take this home and have this as a point of reference in our home. Great. So let's see. Okay, so we have a few questions. So from Precious, when it comes to trying to define public space and belonging in the form of dance, what do you find is the most effective way to do that? Are there reasons for certain dance movements or the number of people on stage? So I think this is a question about kind of inhabiting space and choreography, and sort of the ideas behind choreography.
I think of choreographers as visual artists. As you know, I've one of the great joys of my life has been sitting beside choreographers as they're creating their works or setting their works on the company. And what I've learned by watching them is basically, you know, they're visual artists, and you're creating paintings on the stage. It is, you know, you talk about grouping people or creating visual tension by placing a group of people, you know, in the center or just off center, and then somebody over in the corner, and just like beyond the dance steps themselves, but just where people are placed in space, has been really interesting to watch choreographers create this process and create dramatic tension, you know, especially choreographers that are making story ballets. We do many different types of work. Some are, you know, as I said before, story ballets or literal, you know, storytelling. Some are just abstract expressions of the movement of the music. Some are explorations of a certain type of movement. So it's very different for each choreographer, for each creator, what's important to them. Some of the choreographers I've worked with, or the company has worked with, are not so much concerned about like where people are in space, but how they are in space. We just had we worked with a choreographer, Camille Brown, who just set her piece, City of Rain, on the company. And she's one that's more concerned about how the dancers are in space, you know, the weight with which they carry their bodies, the realism with which they perform. She doesn't want them to look performative. She wants them to really have visual experiences with each gesture that they make, you know, that they are experiencing an emotion, whether they're, you know, wiping their hands, so that it's not a dance move, you know, but an emotional expression. And she doesn't really, you know, we have like some patterns on the floor and some, you know, general, but she cares more about how they are than where they are. Then, you know, other choreographers are very specific about, you know, lining everybody up on stage, whether it's not like Rockette style, but, you know, just to create a stage pattern so that not only from the front, but if you're looking at it from the balcony or from a higher vantage point, your eye can still be engaged in a different way. You might not get all of the emotional content that's being projected to the front of the stage, but you're going to be able to see patterns and how they move in space from a different vantage point.
To follow up on that, I think Leslie's question is, how have you seen choreography evolve, or these sort of different kinds of approaches to choreography evolve over your time with Ailey? Because, you know, I think it's one of we had students read Tommy DeFrance's essay. And one of the things that DeFrance pays a lot of attention to are the different kinds of, dances that become sort of kind of make their way in and out of the repertory at different moments. And they have, you know, they take hold of the audience in different ways. And so this sort of, so, you know, is a kind of move to this sort of the question of how dancers are. Is that something that's, you know, that you've seen is more of interest in a later period, or like how have these questions evolved over your time at Ailey?
I think the main thing that I've witnessed is the technical development, the technical proficiency that keeps just moving, you know, in terms of the dancer's abilities. And I think that really dictates a lot to a choreographer especially somebody that's going to create a piece on the company, they really get in there like kids in candy shops. With, you know, we have, you know, like a small audition period, and invariably we'll have, you know, they will say, okay, I'm going to make a 10-minute piece and I'm going to use 6 dancers. And, you know, then they get in the room and they see all the dancers and suddenly, you know, can I use the whole company? And what about, you know, and it's just, so I think the advancement of the technical capabilities of the dancers has really driven choreographers in terms of what they want to do. When I was coming up, and I think in the earlier days of the Ailey Company, and you know, choreographers have talked about this. Alvin's talked about this. George Faison, for one, has talked about this. That a lot of the choreography at that time was kind of aspirational, you know, and that it was created in order to give the dancers a challenge and to be able to push them beyond their boundaries, you know, because again, we just didn't have that many places to train and really be able to sustain a long period of technical development. So lots of times choreography was used to challenge the dancers in a way that maybe they weren't able to get into class all the time because there were just limited places where we could study. So George Faison talked about in Sweet Otis that he used that as a training ground for his dancers, the same way Balanchine did. I mean, a lot of Balanchine's choreography was meant to challenge his dancers to stimulate their technical growth. And so, you know, Alvin and you know, many of our earlier choreographers were really, you know, just trying to, like, how many hard steps can I throw in here? You know, I remember one time Alvin was choreographing this piece, Phases, and I ran into him in the hall and I said, oh, you know, the music is great. Everybody's really enjoying it. We're really enjoying Phases so much. Everybody's really happy with it. And I was like, yeah, because I didn't make it hard enough. You know, so he always was, you know, trying to, you know, like push the envelope with the dancers' abilities. And now I really feel that, you know, he's always screaming, like, get your legs up and get them higher and, you know, turn more. And so dancers training really kept moving ahead to kind of try to meet these demands. And so now I really feel that, you know, if Alvin was alive today, you know, the dancers that are in the company, you know, these past 2 like iterations, this generation would be the dancers that he was thinking about, you know, back in the early days, you know, when he was trying to get us to, you know, go beyond our abilities.
That's great. Well, there are a few questions about, it seems a few people who are either aspiring or secret dancers, wanting to know more about how to be a great dancer. But I think I want to take this question from Anna. How do you deal with questions of accessibility in terms of, you know, being able to access, to pay for shows, but also that the company relies on the revenue to keep making work and performing. And let me see if I can read this. I guess it's all, in what ways can dance be a public art form, and in what ways is it not a public art form? But I think really thinking about this question of financial accessibility as well. And I know you talked a little bit about that with the educational program, et cetera, but if you could say a little bit more, it'd be great.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I wish we had a clear answer. I mean, you know, we do what we can in terms of trying to, you know, find benefactors or donors that will, you know, subsidize a certain number of tickets, student rate tickets, holding different kind of activities, you know, so that, for example, we've done flash mobs, you know, outside of Zellerbach, you know, where we've taught, you know, Wade in the Water, or, you know, the yellow section from Revelations, or, you know, in Los Angeles. Basically, if there's a theater with a plaza in front of it, we're going to be out there dancing with people, you know, to give them the ability to at least, you know, have some kind of experience with Ailey. And then I think this is an ongoing conversation about how to make sure that art is not the province of the elite, that we can find ways for people to be able to come into the theater and have an experience. And we're struggling with it before. I remember when it was a big deal that a Broadway ticket cost $100. It was like, front page news, and now $100 is cheap for a Broadway show. And so I think across the spectrum of the performing arts, we're all struggling with this accessibility issue, because as we all know, like the artists, the future artists are usually audience members that see something that that sparks something. And if you can't get those young people into a theater, that's a whole generation, there are generations of creativity that's not being tapped. And we address it in terms of, we have many school time performances where school kids are brought into the theater and have a special performance. And I would say about at least a third of our company members were first introduced to the Ailey Company through a school time performance, including our artistic director, Robert Battle. First saw the Ailey Company as a 12-year-old on one of those school performances. We're grappling.
I think you also said in the beginning that the ways in which the performance, even the ethos that the performance is not the kind of the pinnacle, right, or the only form of of presentation, right, or of distributing the kind of the knowledge and sharing it, I think is really important, and I think is probably something that will sustain Ailey, for a long time, because there are ways for us to access the company, even, we talked thinking about the Instagram page, right, and kind of what has become available of Ailey's history that way. Ailey Access, the public programs, the educational programs, I think are all, giving us a kind of profound access in a moment that really is forcing us to ask these real questions about accessibility and about being able to share, to share in the hopes that when we can all, open our doors again, right? What are the things that we, those of us who can, that we are willing to invest in, or that we want to support? And I think, this actually follows Max's question about, Max asks, how do you think art and dance specifically influences a student's academic success? What are the impacts of learning and training in dance for an individual's overall success? Because I think, this is another question we've had, is that we know that arts are so important at every stage of our development and every stage of education. But if maybe you could say a little bit about that from AileyCamp, or et cetera.
Well, actually, that is the genesis of AileyCamp. Kansas City houses the Kansas City Friends of Alvin Ailey, which is our unofficial second home. It was a grassroots organization that was first started just, some guys, some people, Alvin was a real people person. So, he would just like find people all over the world and, create these friendships. And so whether you had any idea about dance or whatever, if you met Alvin Ailey, you wanted to know more about him. So anyway, they had this organization, and they became presenters of the Ailey organization. They commissioned some works, some choreography by Alvin, but also we would do residencies. The company would do residencies. And so in one particular residency, there were some dancers that did like a week's worth of workshops in a school where the students were, is one of those last stop for truant children schools. And so they did a week-long workshop, and we always do this. Nobody thought anything of it. But the teachers noticed there that even after just this 1 week of dance classes, that somehow the kids were more insightful about what they were reading. They were offering, insightful analysis, an incisive analysis, and just in a week, they had really kind of started to look at their work a little bit differently. And so that really is how the AileyCamp idea was born, was from this group experience. And so if we had 6 weeks with kids, what could we accomplish? And you know, as you've seen with your son, and what we've seen over and over again is, you know, it's not just the dance enables the person to emerge and to interact within their world in a different way. And so we were able to see that, you know, over and over and over again, that especially with AileyCamp, because they have 4 dance classes a day, plus they have a creative communications class, which can be poetry writing, you know, it could be a visual arts class, whoever the teacher is, kind of takes them on that journey, playwriting, whatever. And then a personal development class where they're able to really delve into their lives and learn about personal responsibility, good decision-making skills, you know, just really about themselves at this particular juncture in their lives. And over again, the kids just really transformed before our eyes. You know, kids that didn't want to get out of bed at all during the school year were getting up extra early to come to AileyCamp, where they could, you know, learn about themselves, you know, going home to you know, lecture their parents about nutrition and how well we should be taking care of our bodies, or, you know, like the books that they read. One particular AileyCamp, you know, created this, their own personal library. So the kids were bringing books in and sharing and exchanging books, you know, so it just really definitely opens up people. You know, we like to say that, you know, like art opens up the heart, which then can open up the mind, and then so you can develop your mind more.
I love that. And I think that's probably a great place for us to end. Ronni Favors, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
We can't wait until you are back at Zellerbach next year. Knock wood.
Knock everything.
Knock everything, and we will all be out there doing a flash mob with you.
Can't wait to see you all there. Can't wait to get back. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.